Hello, my name is Lewis and welcome to Gathering the Magic. Today we're looking at the top 10 best Grixis commanders in MTG. Starting off at number 10 we have Admiral Beckett Brass. From Ixalan, this 3/3 human pirate says other pirates you control get +1/+1 and at the beginning of your end step gain control of target non-land permanent controlled by a player who has dealt combat damage by 3 or more pirates this turn. This deck is all about that pirate tribal. From sets like Ixalan that specialised in pirates to newer sets like Commander Legends, with the pirate tribe now being over 100 cards strong. The good thing about pirates is they love to pillage and attack, with many of these having good attack or combat damage triggers. And with plenty of pro pirate cards and even more ways to either have those pirates creating treasure or other ways to make treasure of your own. Then those standard wincons like Revel in Riches are a surefire way to get that victory royale. All of this added up with that second Beckett ability means not only will you be having those fun attack triggers, but when you swing with all of those creatures, Beckett will help steal those non-land permanents your opponents control, which will really help you gain control of the board. This is a great and very fun commander, especially if you're looking for a different but interesting tribal deck build. Maybe we should do a budget deck tech on this in the future. Before we get on to number 9, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for all things MTG. It's completely free to do, and it helps our channel grow and grow as we head towards 2,000 subscribers. Speaking of GTM budget deck techs, next on this list is thraximunda. We won't cover this one in great detail, as I said we did do a full $50 budget thraximunda deck tech during Decktober. This hasty 6/6 zombie assassin says when it attacks, each player sacks a creature, and whenever a player sacks a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on thraximunda. For a deck like this, we're not just relying on that attack and sack trigger, we're throwing in all sorts of ways to get those creatures off the board. From the classic creature ETB removal, creatures that allow you to have that free sack outlet, and those instants and sorceries to get even more creatures off the board. This deck can also lean very heavy into some zombie tribal. Plenty of zombies to give other zombies +1/+1, zombies to give other zombies flying, and even those zombies to regenerate more of the undead. Finally, with other ways to get you a big army quick, and Rooftop Storm to reduce those zombie casting costs to nearly 0, then this is a deck that can quickly wipe out your opponent's board and get you that big undead army to bite into your opponents for the win. And if you do want to check out the thraximunda budget deck tech we did, the link is in the description below. For the next Grixis commander we have Yeleva, Nephilia's Scourge. This flying vampire wizard says whenever it ETBs, each player exiles top X cards of their library, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast Yeleva. And whenever Yeleva attacks, you may cast an instant or sorcery exiled with it without paying its mana cost. This deck is all about that theft. We're going to be milling our opponents to play Yeleva and steal their instants and sorceries, but it won't stop there. Fill that deck with plenty of those hateful ways to exile your opponent's cards and cast them with your own mana, or even better, play them for nothing at all.
Nothing at all. Nothing at all.
As well as all of the millions of ways to steal things from your opponents, if you really want to focus on your Yeleva, getting a few of those flicker or return to hand options to not only protect your Yeleva if you're in a pinch, but also just have the extra chances to play it over and over again, mill your opponents and play some more of their own cards. Devilishly disgusting. Also for a deck like this, make sure to have slightly more counter spells and other ways to control the board, and make sure you always have one step over all of your opponents. You love to see it. Next on the list we have Inala, Archmage Ritualist. From C17, this human wizard says whenever another non-token wizard ETBs under your control, if Inala is in the command zone or on the field, you may pay 1. If you do, create a copy of that wizard with haste, exiling it at the beginning of the next end step. With one last ability to tap 5 untapped wizards you control, making target player lose 7 life. This deck is all about that wizard tribal. This is one of the oldest tribes in MTG, with the very first wizard being introduced in the alpha set. You'll be packing this Inala deck with endless wizards, some that have those ETB triggers, some that will give your triggers an extra trigger, and those cards that benefit you from having wizards. There are also so many legendary wizard cards too that will really boost the playing power of your deck. With Inala's ability, there are so many of those creatures that will give you such an advantage if you pay the 1 and create a token copy of it. Finally, this is a commander that really does offer so much more, as you can pay the 1 to create a copy from the command zone, which is a very rare feat even in Commander, and potentially stops Inala from being a target of removal if it's on the board. Just make sure they don't have any of those Frogify cards, That'll really put a halt into Inala's ability. Just missing out on the top half we have Lind, Cheerful Tormentor. This human warlock with Death Touch says whenever a curse is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return it to the field attached to you at the beginning of the next end step, and at the beginning of your upkeep you may attach a curse attached to you to one of your opponents, drawing 2 cards if you do so. Another deck we recently covered in great detail during Decktober, this time revolving completely around those curses. There are dozens of curses spread throughout MTG, and this deck is going to be loaded with them. We're also going to pack in plenty of those curse and enchantment loving cards to get more out of all of the millions of enchantments hitting your side of the field. This is a great commander card that once you get a few of those curses spread to your opponents, it will be really hard to stop. Next up on this Grixis list we're looking at Nicol Bolas, the Ravager. The flying legendary Elder Dragon says when it ETBs, each opponent discards a card. You can then pay to transform Nicol Bolas into the Arisen. You can +2 to draw 2 cards, -3 to deal 10 damage to target creature or player, -4 to put target creature or planeswalker from a graveyard onto the field under your control, and the ultimate -12 to exile all but the bottom card of target player's library. This deck is all about those planeswalkers and proliferation. Throw in all of the many cards to proliferate those loyalty counters so we can ult Nicol Bolas as soon as possible. Also, throwing in a butt ton of planeswalkers, as the more we have on the field, the more we can proliferate at the same time and really take control of the game. And why don't we just add even more of those Nicol Bolas planeswalkers? He is the biggest villain in the history of MTG, so why not get as many of him on the field as possible? Finally, why not get some of those card stealers? You're already likely going to be the archenemy, you may as well go into full evil mode. And this is definitely a card I think I may have to build a deck around one day. Just missing out on the top 3 we have a Beckett, Brute Chronologist. From Commander Legends, this 3/4 Ogre Wizard can tap and says the player whose turn it is may end the turn. This stack stopping card is brilliant to get in all of those cards that you can really gain advantage of by not having to do their end of turn trigger, which could possibly lose you your hand, life or even more. Especially when there is an abundance of cards that can bring creatures back onto the field and sack them at the end of your turn. This is a brilliant way to cheat around that and gain a real advantage on your side of the board. Especially in black, you also have cards to temporarily steal your opponent's creatures, which again you can stop thanks to a beaker. All of these cards tend to be cheaper to cast too, as they have that negative that they leave on your end step. So this commander will really start paying its value off in no time at all. And finally, if a beaker is stuck in the command zone, there are plenty of end the turn cards that you can jam up there to keep that strategy rolling. A great commander and one that is definitely better than meets the eye. Next on up is Hazer, the Black Rose. This human wizard has Dethrone and gives other creatures you control Dethrone. And whenever another creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, return that card to the field under your control at the beginning of the next end step. This deck is all about those +1/+1 counters. The more ways we have to get those counters on our creatures, the more creatures that when they die, return safely back to the field under our control. Not only are there plenty of cards that can get super strong with those +1/+1 counters, but plenty that give other creatures effects like being unblockable if they have counters on them, which is huge. And if you've got counter keepers like the Ozolith, then even if those counter creatures die, the counters are ready to be redistributed again and again. This is a commander I've personally played against plenty, and is one that if its engine gets up and running, it is impossible to stop. Play creatures, gain counters, creatures die, they come straight back, repeat and win. Runner up and the second best Grixis commander is Nekusar, the Mindraiser. This legendary zombie wizard says at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card, and when an opponent draws a card, Nekusar deals 1 damage to that player. This deck is going to be really crazy. We're filling this deck with all of those great wheel cards, getting our opponents to discard their hands and draw as many cards as possible. The more cards we draw, the more cards our opponents draw, and the more damage we're doing to our opponents. We also want to be able to play those extra cards that also deal our opponents for a damage whenever they draw a card. Why ping them for just 1 damage with Nekusar when we can be pinging them for 3 or more? If we're also packing in the usually group hug type cards like Dictate of Crucifix, we're forcing our opponents to draw more cards and pinging them for even more damage. And if we're feeling extra evil, we're adding in all those cards like Tergrid. Our opponents will be having to discard so many cards, we'll be stealing them all and becoming absolutely unstoppable. This really is a deck that can get out of hand and destroy your opponents again and again. And the winner of the most popular Grixis commander is Kess, Dissident Mage. This 3/4 human flying wizard says during each of your turns you may cast an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. If a card cast this way would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. This is a card not only popular in Commander, but very popular in CDH too, thanks to that always beloved combination of Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation. You also want to throw in all of those cards to cheapen the cost of all of the instants and sorceries you'll be playing. Get those spells to double down on the spells you play, and just get in all of those super cheap instants and sorceries for that nice cheap replayability. And with a barrage of cards that really sync well with the wide variety of instants and sorceries you'll be playing, the value engine will really go wild in the blink of an eye. Kess is an incredible commander, and one that me, Master Steve, is a big fan of. There we have it, that is the list. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for all things MTG. Check out our link tree in the description below for all of our social media and affiliate links. For now though, I am all tapped out, so I'll see you in the next video.